Hello, welcome to Beat Burnout, this interview series. So today I'm actually joined by Henrietta. This time is on the same side of the world as me. She lives in the UK. She's a life strategist and leadership coach. She describes herself as a country girl. She's full-time curious and a part-time writer, like me. Former corporate climber and former vegetarian. She's a former perfectionist and a language aficionado. She's crazy in love with life, traveling and driving fast cars on country lanes. She's a mum of two. She's a morning person. She wears a heart on her sleeve, and she's the voice of logic and reason. She's the author of Heart Smart, One Woman's Journey from Her Head to Her Heart. She describes herself as a left brain woman who loves hanging out in the left hemisphere of her brain. She loves logic, intellectual rigor, and neuroscience. And she sees herself as a really good problem solver. She enjoys this challenge. She loves coaching because her left brain helps her to be comfortable with structure, focus, and analysis. But she's also driven by her heart. And she hangs out in her right brain too. She feels and loves very deeply. She cherishes friendships and enjoys meaningful relationships. And she's thrilled when she's inventing new ways of running businesses and creating multiple solutions. And she loves mostly family. Sunday works, hanging out with her family. And she gets very, very weak in the knees when her heart is touched. So welcome, Henrietta, to the Burnout interview series. One is, you seem to have done so much, and I know that the few times that we've connected, you have really made me kind of question a lot of things. And I kind of just wanted to ask you, how did you get to doing what you're doing today?
Well, I had a corporate background, so I used to work for the European Union in my youth. I say youth, after graduating from university, I became what I call the usual corporate chaser. And I thought that the corporate world is going to give me everything I need for money, happiness. It did in some ways opened up a lot of doors for me. But on the other hand, it really cut me off from the things that really mattered to me. So family, I was already on a burnout actually for the first 2 years of my career, because there were days when we had to put in 14, 16 hours a day. And you kind of do it because you feel that it's something that is really important to you, because it's going to give you the return of a stable life. Mm-hmm. However, what I had to give up, which was my inner peace, was a bigger price to pay. So when I gave up that job, to the dismay of everybody, my mother was absolutely terrified, and she said, how can you give up a job for life? Mm-hmm. But I felt that something in my heart was not really settling with that kind of rat racy running after things that is not even mine. So I packed up my stuff, took all my savings, and I went to Egypt, where I practically discovered that there's a different way of living. So I moved there. I was there for about 6 months. I was studying different things, and I just really wanted to connect with people. So even then, I wasn't trained as a coach, but I just love conversations. I always loved connecting with people and see what people's stories are. And as a writer, it was a brilliant opportunity for me to really live a life that was so different from my Hungarian upbringing. So it was a very exotic, the hot sand of Egypt really healed me on the first round. So then when I decided to come to the UK, I settled and I got married within a very short period of time. After my second child, when I was expecting my second child, I really started to think about long term. So what kind of lifestyle do I want, and how do I want to be living while I value my family? And for me, it was really truly important, because both my children have been home educated for the primary years that they have. They are now heading to, one of them is in secondary school, the other one is going to secondary school next year. But I always wanted to give them the first years as a home educating experience, because I believe in the power of educating children to think well, be comfortable with their emotions. So I believe that somehow my personal life has always intertwined with my professional life, because I've always driven by my values more than I was driven by money, or more than I have ever been driven by success. I never really thought of myself as somebody who would just plow through things and rush through things just for the sake of doing something. I believe in meaningful work. And I think when I was expecting my son, my second child, it really came together for me that I could actually make a decision to build up my business and look at my own life in a very different way.
And tell me a little bit more about when you were in corporate and you were burnt out. There must have been some pretty dark moments. What was the darkest moment that made you realize that you needed?
Well, I think I have a take on this, because while I was in the corporate setup, I really didn't really feel burnt out. I felt tired and I felt drained most of the time, but I could never put it down to an idea of I'm burnt out, I don't want to do this. I had a little bit of even things like getting to work in the morning or waking up and asking myself, why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? But because the corporation has given me a very stable existence, financially, it's a very rewarding environment. And I used to travel a lot. So my life was practically on the go, continuously living from suitcase to suitcase. They called me in the morning, come to the office prepared because we are going to Brussels or we are going to some other country. There was always this kind of on the go. And I realized probably about a couple of years later that the real burnout came crushing on me after, because one particular evening I remember, and I wrote about this in my book because it was so fundamentally important, that realization for me, is that we were doing an exercise with a couple of other coaches in my living room, and the exercise was to look at work-life balance. And I wasn't in the corporation by then, but I looked at my life and I thought my life was really making sense, and it looked amazing from the outside, actually. And I looked at my work-life balance. I did a little drawing, and I was horrified when I said to myself, I could throw this whole thing away. The big house doesn't mean anything to me. The wonderful kids are draining me. My marriage was draining me, and I just couldn't see, myself. And I remember that really dark, heavy feeling in my chest, which said, you need to look for something else. This is not who you are. This is not what you need to be doing. So then I went through a really difficult period of time, probably for about 3-4 years. And part of that was for me to move over to another country. And of course, now I can tell that chasing and moving to another country is not going to solve the problem. But it gave me an opportunity to really look at what I want, what am I struggling. And for 4 years, that's pretty much what I was doing.
And it's really interesting that you say that you couldn't see yourself, because that was with me. I remember I was just so bitter and angry towards my husband, and I said, you don't see me. And he looked at me in a strange way. What do you mean I don't see you? I see you all the time. And then I realized it was me that couldn't see myself. I had disappeared with you're talking about the constant doing, the constant rushing around, the constant not having any space to even think, feel about for yourself.
Yes.
And I kind of wanted to ask you, was it easy to accept the help when you made a decision to leave the country and leave your job? Was that easy to kind of do?
Oh no, it's never easy, is it? It's very easy to think about it and talk about it, and we get inspired by people who do it, but actually making a decision and do it was really challenging. But I tell you what helped me. As a way of healing myself, or as a way of finding myself in where I was in life, I signed up for an amazing leadership program with my coaching company, which I trained before. So I knew the company, I trusted the company, and they had this amazing coaching leadership program, which is a 10-month program. And I remember when I was filling up the application form, the first question was really quite sharply hitting me, that how easy is it for you to ask for help? And I didn't understand the question. I said, what do they mean? Of course it's easy. I tell my husband to do things. I tell my children to do things. Of course. But it was a very different connotation. Asking for help is truly a leadership skill. And when we know what it means, and I understood it much later while I was in the program, we were challenged on so many different levels. And every single time we needed to ask for help. And on the surface level, it looks like, yeah, I'm just going to ask people to do things for me. But asking help isn't about that. Asking help is about telling somebody I'm struggling and I need your help to get through this, because the struggle isn't there forever. The struggle is there for us to grow. And as a leader, we need to recognize that we are in the process of growing, and we can only grow, or even our traditions teach us that we can only grow through pain, from challenges, from difficulties. And when I recognize this now, I wish I could just, be a lot more comfortable. If there was one lesson I regret in life, is not learning this earlier, how to ask for help, because it does two things really to people. First of all, it takes off the pressure of you trying to fix everything, do everything by yourself, always waiting for some miracle to happen. But it also does another thing. When you open up to people, it creates a very deep, intimate connection. And I'm talking about emotional intimacy. I'm talking about, I love the way my clients, sometimes when they start opening up, there is this flowing into themselves where they feel really comfortable of who they are, messy or not, doesn't matter. But that's the moment of realization, and that connection, that sacred connection that you can only create when you are comfortable of doing that yourself. So, as a coach, I always say to people, coach and therapist, have your own coach and do your own therapy continuously. I still go to my own because I did.
And I'm so glad that you've said that, because I know lots of social workers, lots of healthcare professionals, sometimes through no fault of their own, because they sometimes don't get clinical supervision, and it's they sometimes have to find therapy themselves. But because they are the help, they find it so difficult to feel just okay with going and getting therapy and going to get coaching and investing in their personal development. I know, because I was there. I've been there for a lot of my life, and although I've invested, to kind of really invest is something really hard. That transition is really hard. And I just kind of wanted to ask you, obviously you were saying in the leadership program you found it hard to ask for help. That transition to kind of being vulnerable and being safe to be vulnerable, because sometimes it's not safe to be vulnerable. You can do it when you hire a coach, or you can do it when you're in therapy, but sometimes that's really hard. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, there are a couple of things I kind of know and interested in about this vulnerability and safety. So I think, first of all, I always valued intellectual rigor and understanding. So when I was working on my book, I looked at the brain and what it does. And for me, fear was one of the biggest topics. And I grew up in a household where safety wasn't necessarily available to us as children all the time. My father had problems with alcohol, and there was a lot of quite hard years. And for their own reason, my father and my mother were struggling. So I didn't actually grow up seeing as a child, and as a child you don't know unless you grow up that you have lost a safety element, so you don't trust life. And as you grow older, your brain gets conditioned to the idea that the world is not a safe place. So when it comes to vulnerability, we are really scared, because our baseline of understanding of life is that it's not safe for me to speak, it's not safe for me to connect, because I am not in a healthy space where I'm held emotionally and physically in safety. So my first reaction to people say, like, what about safety and vulnerability? This is something that is within us. It's something that we work through ourselves. Nobody is ever going to come and put the red carpet down, come and have safety. It's all given to you. No, we have to walk through some steps. And I think one of the first steps is self-realization, looking at where you feel triggered, looking at where you feel unsafe, what situations, what people, what sort of conversations trigger you to run back to your own shell and want to be unseen and not too protected. Because I think within ourselves, we have this capacity to run back really fast and protect ourselves. And in the name of protection, we cut off relationships, we cut off conflict, we kind of run back home, and we think everything is going to be okay. But of course it isn't, because life is carrying on and the problem is never going to disappear. So the first is really the self-realization of when and where do I feel unsafe. So this is really important. The second is really become comfortable with not staying in that mindset. And I think that's why, and that's one of the main reasons why therapy and coaching is so useful and so helpful, because once people realize their comfort zone, then to be able to move from comfort zone to another place outside of the comfort zone, they need help. And it could be, I look at my work in a way that I help people to look at things intellectually, and then through practice, they enlarge their being, because there's a part of us which is a doing part of us, and the other part of us which is the being part.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are stuck with the doing for all their life, and we just run on things like, this is what I do. Our language even projects that when we introduce ourselves, we don't say who we are, we say what we do. So it's really quite obvious. So first we need to understand things intellectually, and I think it's really important that we read books, we talk to people, we discuss, and then it's about the practice. So it's about really becoming comfortable being in conflict, for example. It's becoming comfortable with saying I need help. It's about becoming comfortable to admit that I made a mistake. How can I rectify it? So there are steps that people can actually take, but I always say to people, don't try to do everything at the same time, because that's in itself can lead to burnout. So it's about taking a very gentle but a very self-loving approach, instead of quickly, let's fix this. A lot of people come to sessions, I want to fix this. Well, you can fix some things, but it will depend on how your being is going to show up in that fixing. And we all have default positions, so we need to be very clear and aware of those.
And I just kind of want to just grasp on that, because you kind of have really grasped at something very important about being. Because when you are a social worker, when you are a healthcare professional, because just the nature of the job means you've got a long list of things to do. Majority of the time, a lot of us set ourselves up with this massive, impossible list of things to do, because there's so many expectations on us to, you know, to safeguard, to risk manage, to have our records up to date, to be there for the client. So sometimes our being is so much just being there for someone else. Don't have the space sometimes to be there, or don't give ourselves space to be there for ourselves. And I just kind of wanted you, I mean, how would you get somebody to, you talked about self-realization, how, what, because you, what steps would you say to kind of like help people that are listening? What would you say would help you to be, from change from doing to being?
I want to give you a little secret. You know, the two parts of the brain, the left brain and the right brain, the two hemispheres of the brain. Traditionally, we always look at the two parts of the brain as the left brain is the doing bit, the logic, you know, how we do things. And the right brain is the daydreamer, the creative, the artistic side of our brain. Now, what we now know, for the last 10 years, actually, we learned more about the brain than what we have learned in the last 100 years, is that between the two hemispheres, there's something called a little bridge called the corpus callosum. Now, the two parts of the brain is connected with essentially with a bundle of nerves. And that little bridge, and I use this metaphor for the left and right brain because I think that's what most people struggle with, is their doing part and the being part. If you translate that, the left part of our brain is almost a bit like it's the doing part of us. This is what it knows, what's next, what I need to do, how to write up a report, how to report to my manager or whatever. So that's the doing part of us. The right side of the brain is responsible for looking at your whole life, your purpose, meaning. It's looking at creatively. It's a hot mess, really. It's a chaotic part of our brain, but it is also where intuition lives. So the two parts, traditionally, we were taught you are either left brain or right brain. But actually, neuroscientists now are saying that the only reason why people would progress is not so much about enlarging one or the other capacity. It's about integrating the two parts of the brain. So when you're doing and your being is integrated, and the way to do it is, you know, I do this with my clients, corporate clients, we don't problem solve because they do it in the boardroom. We do creative projects, we do dance, we do something that is taking them out of their usual way of solving a problem. And while they paint a picture, for example, they discover a solution to a problem they have at work. So it's about crossing over from one side of your brain to the other. When you do that, physically, you are strengthening the corpus callosum. So your connections between the two parts of your brain are giving you more access to who you are. So that can accommodate more of your being. And it's a bit like, when you have a job, if you are running on the tracks of what do I need to do to get this job done, it's very different experience when you say, how do I need to be in this job? And I think it's knowing. Awareness is about knowing which one is useful and when. Sometimes the doing is really important. When I'm coaching, notes to my clients, recommending books, talking about important things is a left brain logical thing to do. But sometimes it's about going crazy and exploring and digging and going with my intuition that makes no sense to anybody, but it creates a new way for my client to be. So that it's a muscle. I believe that this is a muscle that we have to strengthen, to know what I need to do and to know what I need to be. And when you need to be, when you are tired and your job is a drag, and when you are really feeling that you can't get your one leg next to the other, you can't get to the office, you can't do your work, it makes no sense to you, it's meaningless, you can't wait to get through the day, you're already thinking about getting back to bed before even you get out of it. But that's when you know that your life is probably on a track that you need to stop and think of how to readjust.
And sometimes it might be that I know sometimes for a lot of healthcare professionals and social workers, sometimes it's not the fact that you can't get to the office. You're in the office and you're functioning okay and you're doing reasonably well, but certain tasks just you can't do them because you can't first of all see the purpose behind them, you don't see the meaning behind them. And sometimes there's certain tasks. I know that there are sometimes certain assessments that I have to do as a social worker when I don't see the purpose of it and procrastinate and don't do them for weeks on end. And then my manager's saying, where is that assessment? I know sometimes it's about looking at that particular task and just changing your focus around it and actually then asking, why are you doing it? What is it that helps you and also help the client? Sometimes just changing your focus, that's what is about bridging those two. That is also about integration.
Absolutely. There's a very famous saying is that when you change how you look at things, the things that you are looking at will change. So it's always about perception, because if you think about it, and for example, this pen can mean so many things to so many of us.
Yeah.
Depending on how we look at it. But some people might come from a left brain, some people might come from a right brain, some people thinking, oh, if I was an artist, what could I do with this pen? Someone else, exactly the same object, but someone else will come, oh, I need this to highlight my accounts. So the very thing that you're looking at is exactly the same. It's the perception of it is what's going to make a difference, how we approach it. So, for example, in life, if I look at something as it's an impossible task, I hate this, I can't do this, that thought is going to create a sense of resentment in the body. That sense of resentment is going to show in our action, meaning we will procrastinate. So that's a very simple, mind, the thought, the emotion, and the action. I always look at it as a triangle. There's a thought, there's an emotion, and out of it comes an action. Now, if your thought is that this task is really boring, I can't stand it, I don't see the purpose why I should be doing that, you are already resentful, and the action is going to be procrastination. If you look at the task, this is a task that could mean something to somebody. That fills you with motivation. And the action, you may not love doing it, but the action will be much easier to do. And, I know this with my lawyer friends and some of my clients who are either accountants or lawyers, that there are tasks that they absolutely must do to stay in the job. They hate it. But you need to look at the context. What you do, if you do that without that particular task, does your job give you the fulfillment? And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So again, it's about being aware that some things have to be looked at differently if you want to have a different approach and outcome. So this is where, as I mentioned, this muscle of awareness is so important, because you can look at this pen and you can spend your 3 weeks looking at it and doing nothing about it. Or you can say, well, actually, this hasn't worked because I'm just looking at it doing nothing. How can I approach it differently? So you can actually shift your perception of that one thing that you're looking at. But at the same time, you enlarge yourself because you grow. You are activating another part of your brain, which will help you to solve a problem in a much more effective way.
Can you just quote what you just quoted there? That was just a brief part. I just wanted to, in case somebody missed it, can you just quote that thing about how you change how you look at things? Can you say it again?
I think it was Wayne Dyer who said that. It says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you are looking at will change.
That's just so powerful. That's
It
really,
is.
really powerful. Very powerful.
Absolutely.
I've just like got goosebumps all over. Just that's. I also wanted to ask you. You seem to put so much of your heart, body, and soul in your projects. And you're such a creative person. How do you work on sort of being a coach, right? How do you work on two creative projects together without burning out, keeping up your motivation?
I think one of the things that really helps me, so I do two things that I love doing. One is coaching and the other one is writing. And I think the way I look at it is I don't label them as I'm doing this and I'm doing that. I'm always kind of doing a little bit of both with every project. So for example, when I'm writing, my coaching is really helpful for my writing because it gives me certain ways of putting things. I'm very good at planning, not so much as executing all the time. So my coaching really helps me to help coach myself to execute the writing projects that I have in mind. And equally, when I'm coaching, my writer part of me, which is, I think it's very perceptive and very sensitive and very intuitive, that comes out in my coaching. So I kind of always work with both and use the skills that and the strengths that I have from both for both sides of my projects. But I also think that what really helped me is that I have a fairly consistent daily and weekly practice, which without which I won't be able to do what I do. You know, and it took me years to develop it and also to practice it, because we talk about this all the time. And I think one of the things that I loved about workshops is that people get so excited that they discover this is what I want to do, but then there has to be some sort of process that helps you through to complete what you want to do or what you want to change. So I normally, on a daily basis, I established a routine of 45 minutes of uninterrupted writing, and doesn't matter what happens and what day it is, even if it means I have to do it on the bus or I do it while I'm waiting for my children in 10-minute bouts, whatever way I do it, but the 45 minutes have to be put in. And it's something that I had to train myself to do. It didn't come naturally. I have been writing journals for the last 20 years of my life, but that's very different from actual writing. So 45 minutes, it's a discipline that I had to kind of train myself of doing. My daily prayer and meditations, of course, that's something that when I now make it a point that my prayer time and my meditation time is about my being time. So it's a very different focus. I don't just do the motions. I actually create that as a sacred context, that this is my time with myself and with God. And that's something that, again, I had to do consciously myself. I also discovered that as a creative person, you can't force yourself into two things. If you're creative, inspiration comes whenever it comes. You can't just, wait for it and let's say between 10 and 10:45 I will have inspiration coming. It doesn't happen that way. And also I have children, so that comes with a whole another level of adjustment. So I discovered that my creative cycle isn't sitting down from 10 till 2 or 1 till 3. Whenever creative cycle comes, I need to work with it. And if it means I can't write, but I can maybe record it, some of my thoughts, some of my ideas, then I do that. Again, it's the connection with myself. I think that's very important. People often don't honor it because they think I have to be doing all the things, but not really honoring that I have something going on within me that is very important to capture. So also, the only structured thing I do is I actually make a date with myself once a week. And
wow, I like that.
And I go by myself. It doesn't have to be anything big. Sometimes I just go to central London, have a nice meal, go for a gallery, go for a film. I do something that has nothing to do with anything that I'm doing. And guess what? Every time I do that, I come back refreshed. I get some more ideas. I might have a solution for what I'm working on. And it just gives me that space of not worrying about what I do. It's about who I am. And it really helps me nurture myself. And, it's wonderful to be with my husband. It's wonderful to go out with the children as a family, community, my clients, friends. Wonderful. But that's sacred alone time when you are not accountable to anybody. You don't have to watch your actions in a sense of, what do I say if I offend anyone, or I have to be very careful. It's just pure time of enjoying what I have in my life, enjoying what I'm doing, and just really giving myself. And I think that really helped me to come around the idea of self-respect, because for me that was a really big learning. I didn't grow up respecting myself very much, and I think that always leads to burnout, because when you don't have a healthy self-respect, you want to be doing more and more to prove to other people that you are worthy.
Not feeling good enough, constantly saying to yourself you're not good enough. That self-talk, I had that for the majority of my life, and I think you've kind of really kind of hit the nail really hard. That just making a date with yourself, I just love that. I wanted to ask you, this is something that you've spoken about quite a lot, is integrity. This is something you talk about quite a lot. And I know somebody else actually said sometimes integrity, and I never actually saw it this way. Integrity is about the promises that you keep to yourself. A lot of people understand it as integrity about promises to keep to others, and that's important. But when they actually said it's about how you keep promises to yourself, it really shifted my perception of it. How would you define integrity? How would you describe it?
I don't have a particular definition for integrity, but I know one thing about integrity is integrity is the core of your being. So for your core of your being to be whole and wholesome and organic and holistic, there's a lot of work to be done. And I think integrity is the one thing that holds our being together. So my kind of understanding around integrity is that it's the very center of our being. And if it's wounded, or if it is overlooked or unhealed, almost, and I'm trying not to use very too much spiritual language, but I think it's important that there is a part of us. So if you look at children, when they are born, they are so perfect. They know everything. They have this natural curiosity, openness, trust. The whole process, how we come to this world, is we think we are powerful. No, we came through into this world without us physically doing anything. We enter the world because there's a process of life that is very natural to all of us. Every single one of us come to the earth in the same way. So that trust is within the children. So when they are growing up, when they start walking, how many times they fall down? They kind of bump and fall down and get up, and trusting that they will do it. And eventually they do. So they start walking, or there's this natural kind of drive that I am good enough to do this. And I think we lose that one thought, I am good enough to do this. We lose it over conditioning. Our parents overprotect us. Our parents are telling us, you're not good for this, you are like this. They start giving us labels. And that's when our integrity starts falling into pieces. Our integrity is our essential core self. That's how we were created. It's full of God's spirit breathed into us. It's that wholeness. And even though as a baby we don't have the language, children have intuition. Children have knowledge that is not spoken of. So it's really important that we understand that integrity is always there. But then as it shatters over time, by the age of 6, 7, we are probably completely losing it, because people are giving us labels. I know with my children, when they started taking exams for secondary school, in this country is particularly different, but I realized that is nothing to do with who they are as human beings. It's how much they memorize, how fast they can produce results, and that's what exam is about. and that then you start questioning your self-worth. Am I good enough? Am I not good enough? And your integrity further divides yourself, and it just goes, I call it, the pearls are just spread on the ground, and they are running everywhere, because that's our integrity. And then there is a spiritual awakening. I need to gather my integrity, and then we start taking up the pearls, thinking, okay, I need to look at self-worth, I need to look at courage, I need to look at fear. None of these things were ever questioned by a baby. They have courage, they have no fear. Look at babies, how they somersault from the sofa, and they do things that requires a lot of courage, and they do it because it's within themselves. We don't do it because we have been conditioned out of it. Same with creativity. All people are creative, but we have been conditioned out of creativity by putting our minds and everything into a structure that is given by a school, that is given by society, and people lose that capacity to be themselves, because we are conforming continuously. Our life is about conformity. So integrity for me is when you don't conform, but you work with everything and everyone that is around you. For me, that's integrity, and that contains your values, your passions, your drive, your skills, your talents, and everything you have that makes the world a better place. Sorry, I've given you a long answer, but
I just think that's just sounds so beautiful. I mean, there was just something as you were talking, and I was thinking, there's something that you said about the left and the right brain is maybe, and sometimes I find the questions are much more important than the answers. Maybe integrity is integration, to actually say, to integrate with people around you, experiences around you, within yourself, the different aspects of you, the dark and the light aspects of you. I'm not going to ask you to answer that.
No, I think you have done it absolutely perfectly. Integrity means being part of something. You see, that's one of the problems in today's world, is that everyone becoming so individual that we talk about, who I am, and I don't care about anybody or what people say. Actually, whatever you say today will have an impact, or is already having an impact on somebody somewhere. So we are all an integral part of life. And integrity is to respect that connection, that whatever I do will have consequences later on, and whatever I say will have consequences somewhere else in the world.
That's very true. I mean, I could talk to you all day, Henrietta, and I'm really conscious of the time. I thank you so much for your time, and I will be back tomorrow.